Thank you for dialing in to this session on the third day of our VirtualQ NAB event. My name is Eric Basier. I run product marketing here at Quantum. And in this session, we'll be focused on accelerating your workflow with the Quantum F-Series NVMe storage servers. This session really focuses on the high-performance Tier 1 storage solutions that we offer as part of our solutions for end-to-end media workflows. And the products and the solutions we'll be talking about in this session are really focused on that stage of production and post-production. It's really for ingest and then for processing, editing, rendering, and finishing. And I hope you've been able to join some of the other sessions that we've been hosting as part of our VirtualQ NAB event, where we talk about some of the other products and capabilities that we have here, from massively scalable online archives to low-cost digital tape archives, and our StorNext file system and data management platform, and some of the new features we're introducing there to help customers on this path toward hybrid and multi-cloud workflows. So with that, let's talk about NVMe and the Quantum F-Series. I want to start with a brief primer on NVMe and RDMA technologies, and then I want to talk about why they're important in NVMe, why our customers are adopting these technologies in media and entertainment. I'll give you an overview of the product line, and then talk about how the product line can be deployed within your environment, and we'll look at the real-world benefits of this through a case study. So, quick primer on NVMe and RDMA. NVMe stands for Non-Volatile Memory Express, and it's actually a new protocol that was designed for flash. It's not a new type of storage, it's actually a new protocol. Many of you probably use flash storage within your shared storage environment today, and the legacy SAS or legacy flash storage arrays use a protocol called SAS. Now, SAS was really designed for serial devices like hard drives or tape, whereas NVMe was designed from the ground up for flash. In terms of why that matters, as a protocol, it gives much faster performance than the flash arrays you're using today. And it gives much faster performance both in terms of streaming performance as well as random access or IOPS, because it really takes advantage of the parallelism that's inherent in flash. RDMA stands for Remote Direct Memory Access. This is a networking technology that with our products we use in conjunction with NVMe to really give the fastest data transfer rate and the lower latencies across Ethernet networks. And that's important as many of our customers are moving to all IP-based workflows. More content is being streamed and distributed OTT or over the top, and just a general trend in the industry of moving from fiber channel toward Ethernet. We'll talk about both. So kind of building on the networking piece there, I like this diagram because it illustrates a lot of important technical concepts, both around NVMe and RDMA. First, looking at the diagram on the right, this is really showing an NVMe storage server, something like a Quantum F-Series array or server running with our StorNext file system. And the first thing to point out is that the combination of RDMA and NVMe bypass the CPU of the server so that we can read and write data directly from the host to the storage without going through the CPU. Obviously, that removes a bottleneck. And as an example, with our F-Series products, we don't have a dedicated RAID controller. We don't use a dedicated RAID controller. In some architectures, that can be a bottleneck. And the way we've architected our software, we perform the RAID function within the software so we can get that data directly to the drives as quickly as possible. Now, on the networking side, let's talk about the different pros and cons of, Ethernet networks using traditional protocols, fiber, and NVMe. And I think this is a good way to break it down. Using Ethernet networks with more traditional protocols, they typically use this TCP/IP stack. RDMA is really an alternative to that. Now, Ethernet has the advantage of having very low infrastructure cost. It's deployed everywhere. It's easy to use. And that's why it's really going to be the infrastructure of the future. But when we think about these TCP/IP protocols, they have very high latencies and also unpredictable latencies. You know, they weren't designed for high-speed streaming, which is really what's important in this industry. They were designed for typical network traffic. And you can kind of see the stack there. It's shown here graphically where, you know, you've got iSCSI, you know, basically SCSI, TCP/IP, the lower level Ethernet transport protocol, that gets sent across the wire, and then it gets unpacked on the other end. And I like this visual because you can see there's more steps to pack it up and more steps to unpack it. Intuitively, that adds latency. Now, Fiber Channel has always had very low latencies. That's why historically, Fiber Channel SANs have been used very commonly in media and entertainment because it has very fast streaming, very low latencies. The issue with Fiber Channel SANs is there's a cost associated with it, and it can be more complex. An example of some of those costs is we have many customers in the space that have actually routed Fiber Channel to their high-end workstations, you know, and that there's a construction cost for that and more. Now, NVMe with RDMA gives the best of both worlds. Because of the new technologies, we're able to deliver the very low latencies that historically have been reserved for Fiber Channel, but we're able to do that using a lower cost, less complex Ethernet kind of hardware layer, if that makes sense, right? So that's really the core technologies, and that's kind of just a quick primer on both NVMe and RDMA. Now, why does it matter in media and entertainment? Let's bring it up a little bit, right? This is why we're seeing customers adopt our Quantum F-Series products in StorNext environments. The first is that all of our customers are dealing with more and more high-resolution content. Not only higher res, but at high frame rates. That drives a need to ingest content a lot more quickly, and NVMe with StorNext really excels at that. That's really where we shine. We have the best streaming performance out there, and that's why we're used so predominantly in this space. In addition to that, as part of their post-production process, many companies are adding visual effects, computer graphics, and they're doing different steps in the post-production process on that very high-res content. Now, the effect of that is that being able to render those sorts of effects in post-production adders requires very large render farms, a lot of compute. And that compute requires highly parallelized access to the storage. Again, NVMe excels at that. And so we've seen customers that have deployed Quantum F-Series in their environment, and they've seen for large render jobs that were taking maybe hours to complete, they've now seen that complete in minutes because their legacy storage infrastructure was the bottleneck. So think about that in terms of your workflow. If you're able to shrink render speeds from hours to minutes, we'll talk about this more at the end, but it really has a great benefit in terms of reducing the time of your media pipeline and being able to create content more quickly. Not only does it have that benefit, but many customers have historically used spinning disk for their production storage, and therefore they need a huge number of spindles to be able to achieve the performance that they need for their workflow. Because NVMe is so much faster, they're able to achieve that performance with much fewer drives. And I'll show you an example at the end. One of our customers was able to replace 3 racks of spinning disk storage under StorNext with 14U of NVMe storage servers. Right, a huge savings in terms of reducing data center space as well as reducing power and cooling. Lastly, as we talked about with RDMA, it enables people to move from an expensive and complex Fiber Channel SAN infrastructure to an Ethernet infrastructure. And the great thing about Quantum Solutions for this space is we offer both. We're one of the leaders in Fiber Channel infrastructures, and we also have really good solutions for Ethernet infrastructures. We offer our F-Series with either a 32 gig fiber connection or a 100 gig E connection where we use RDMA. And so you kind of have that choice. And we've had customers that have deployed both options, especially as companies are migrating from one type of network to the next. So those are some of the reasons that NVMe continues to be such a relevant technology in media. And we saw these trends happening. We worked with some of our early adopting customers to develop the F-Series, and we rolled it out last year. Quantum's line of F-Series is a line of high-performance NVMe storage servers for use with our StorNext file system. We've been really pleased with the adoption of this. It's in production. These products are in production at some of the world's biggest corporations, government agencies doing advanced augmented reality work and virtual reality work, leading post houses and broadcasters, and they're just incredibly pleased with the results they're getting with the product. I'm also proud of the awards that we've won and that the product line has been garnished over the last year. In fact, just today we won an additional award, Best of Show for 2020, which we'll be publishing here shortly. So we introduced the F-Series last year. The first product that we introduced was the Quantum F2000. This is a 2U NVMe storage server with 24 dual-ported NVMe drives. All 24 drives have access to both compute canisters. So if you look at the rear of the product, you see that this server design has 2 different canisters, and we can fail over our software between those 2 canisters. So if you have a hardware failure, we can fail over to the other controller, keep your systems up and running. We also have redundant, hot swappable fans, power supplies, everything. In short, this product was designed for the highest levels of performance and availability. And if you have a workflow or a data workload that requires the highest level of availability, this is a great product. Now, we also heard from customers as we got into last year that they said, hey, they have a need for NVMe, but they don't necessarily need the highest levels of availability for what they do, and they don't necessarily need to pay for the price or the cost that comes with this level of design. And so earlier this year, we introduced the Quantum F1000. The Quantum F1000 uses the same software and the same core software-defined technology as the F2000, but we've packaged it in a 1U server with 10 NVMe drives, and we've tried to strip out what we can to just drive the price down, drive the cost down. Now, it comes with a single controller. Our software does RAID 10 protection on the disk, so you have still a good measure of data protection and availability. And we offer it in 2 capacity points, 38 terabyte usable and 77 terabyte usable. The F1000 offers the same connectivity options as the F2000. So you've got the 100 gig E, and we use a flavor of RDMA called ICER, or we've got 32 gig fiber. Now, we think this product is also pretty exciting. Some of the early places that it's being adopted and deployed are customers that want to start to introduce NVMe into their production storage, but maybe they don't want to fully upgrade all of their storage all at once to NVMe. And with our StorNext software, we make that very easy to do. And I'll explain that a little bit next and give you an example. For those that have listened into our separate sessions this week on what's new with StorNext and StorNext 6.4, you know that with the latest version of our StorNext file system, we've introduced a new capability or feature called file system pools. This allows users to define different pools of production storage. For example, a pool of NVMe storage and a pool of disk-based storage, which is lower cost. The administrator of the system can then move files and directories between those pools of storage and also direct and allocate that maybe certain users or certain processes have access to NVMe while others have access to hard drive storage. I'll give you an example of this. Some of our customers have editors or colorists that have a need to work in 8K RAW or 4K RAW at high frame rate content in real time. And this would allow you to give those types of users access to the NVMe storage pool. Another example might be rendering. When it's time to do a render job, you can move files and directories that need to be rendered to this NVMe storage pool, complete the render job, again, orders of magnitude faster, and then the finished product gets distributed, and you can move those, move that content out of NVMe. Conversely, you may have a user like a producer or a reviewer of content that needs to sign off on something. They maybe don't need to see the high-res content in real time at 60 frames a second, and they can work out of the lower-cost disk-based storage pools. Okay, so we make it very easy to configure this, and our solution architects can work with you on the best design for your needs and your workflow. But the net is that we can deploy a solution that is the right blend of high-performance NVMe and lower-cost disk-based storage to optimize both performance and cost for your workflow. In addition to that, StorNext for many years has had leading technology to be able to archive content to an object store, and that could be it could be a private object store like our ActiveScale system that we've introduced, or it could be a public cloud object store from any of the leading public cloud providers. And of course, we also have great integration with tape if you want to have a deep media archive stored on quantum digital tape. So we really continue to invest in this area, build out our capabilities, and I think with NVMe, the latest enhancements in our StorNext software make it very easy to add NVMe to your existing storage environment and receive some of these benefits. So when we talk about the real-world benefits of NVMe, I want to look at a case study. This is one of our early customers that adopted the Quantum F series. They're a large corporation that does a lot of high-res content creation, editing, and distribution and development to promote their brand and their products. They were a StorNext customer, and they were running their production environment on disk-based storage, and they wanted to move to all NVMe in this case. So they've actually upgraded their entire production environment to be 100% NVMe. They had 3 full racks of spinning disk. First, let's talk kind of the operational impact here in the middle. They had 3 full racks of spinning disk. They were able to shrink their rack space by 88% and take that entire thing down to only 14U of rack space. I mean, imagine what you can do if you can gain back data center space, start to deploy different things to use it, or if you have a colo, or if you have a data center that's in a metro area, this data center space is very valuable real estate. And I think this is one of the financial elements of deploying NVMe, that you can actually gain back a lot of that space and have a real savings at the same time while you're boosting performance. So that's kind of the operational impact. From a performance standpoint, this customer saw an increase in both throughput and IOPS that was really substantial. They required that because they were just working with so much more 4K and 8K content. They really were consuming that pretty quickly, and they needed to upgrade. And they maintained the capacity that they were managing. In addition to the operational impact, they saw some significant financial savings. They were able to reduce their annual power and cooling costs. That's really driven because we went from 3 racks of disk with hundreds of spindles to 14U of NVMe, lower power, lower cooling. And they actually reduced their fiber channel port count from 240 ports to 56 ports. Again, for those that are familiar with fiber channel port costs, that's a significant savings. Most impactful, I think, is what it's done for their business and what NVMe could do for your business. If you can ingest high-res content more quickly, your teams can start working on that content more quickly. If they're able to complete their work more quickly, you can complete projects and get them done and get them back to your clients, or distribute them to your consumers and your audience, your fan base more quickly. And another example is with a step in the process like rendering. or transcoding that are really compute heavy, if you can speed up those processes where your legacy storage infrastructure is a bottleneck, you can really shrink your media pipeline and ultimately produce more content, generate more revenue, make your team more productive and more efficient. And so I think that's really the ultimate benefit of NVMe, but it also allows you to do that while reducing costs in some of these other areas. So we think that even in the current situation, even with the global pandemic, we believe that now is a good time to be looking at investing in NVMe as part of your infrastructure, and we think it can provide some really good benefits. So that's the conclusion of this. That really focuses on our high-performance Tier 1 storage for editing, rendering, and finishing, the Quantum F series. And again, I encourage you to tune in to more sessions to learn about some of the other aspects of our portfolio for end-to-end media workflows. With that, let's open it up and I will take some questions. Thanks to those of you that dialed in. For every session, we will be selecting 3 winners to receive a $25 Uber Eats gift card, and you'll be notified of that by email along with your e-gift card. So again, thank you for joining and thank you for your continued attendance over the last few days. If you do want to learn more, or if you have questions that you haven't asked on chat, reach out to your local Quantum representative and make sure to go to our website, quantum.com. We have data sheets and specifications on the F-Series products I talked about today. We also have reference architecture documents and more literature from industry analysts and others that talk more about the technology. So with that, let's open it up for questions. And let's see, first one coming in is around performance. Performance of an F2000 approximate in terms of gig per second. We spec this out at being anywhere from 25 to 30 gig per second read and write for an F2000 server. That's kind of what we've tested in our labs and kind of what we published in some different papers. Obviously, with performance, your mileage will vary. And we had a really interesting session with a user of this Disguise Technologies earlier. They talked more about kind of the performance they've seen in some real world scenarios. But that at least gives you a starting point. What we kind of spec it out at is 25 to 30 gig per second read and write. And we're also making some updates to our software going forward to continue to improve that. So good question on that. Thank you. If you do have more questions on that, reach out to your local Quantum representative and we can get those answered. And then another question about networking, and this is one that's come up on every session actually, pointing out that in order to deploy an F-Series in a StorNext environment on an RDMA network, you do need to have that network infrastructure, right? And so we've been working a lot with switch providers like Mellanox and Arista to deploy StorNext with F-Series in those networks. We've learned a lot. I would say early on that was one of the areas where there was a learning curve associated with that. And the good news is that over the last little over a year of deploying F-Series in those environments, our professional services team, as well as our VAR partners, have learned a lot, documented a lot, and between them and our solution architects, we can help you architect and deploy a solution appropriately for your needs. Question clarifying around 32 gig fiber. And yeah, both the F2000 and F1000, we do offer a 32 gig fiber connectivity. So if you are on a StorNext fiber channel SAN, very easy to deploy, and you get excellent performance on fiber channel as well. All right, well, I'm not seeing any additional questions at this time. So for those that dialed in, thank you very much. Please continue to attend these live panel sessions as part of our VirtualQ NAB event. And I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.